So let's move on to our first theme. So when Deep Blue beat world chess champion Garry Kasparov in 1997, it seemed like we were on the precipice of being perhaps even overtaken by machines. But 20 years on, have we really made enough progress to suggest the actual potential for true artificial intelligence? So the question that I'd like to put to you all is, what is actually the nature of intelligence? And could this ever be found in a machine? Anders?
So I'm very fond of a definition of intelligence that Shane Legg, one of the co-founders of Google DeepMind, had. After surveying a lot of definitions in psychology, he kind of converged on the view that intelligence is the ability of reaching your goals in general environments. So general environments is doing a lot of work here. An intelligent person is supposed to be able to play both chess and learn a little bit of basic surgery or do anything else. It's something that is a general problem-solving ability, assuming that agent wants to do it. Now the tricky thing is, of course, what we might set the craziest goals for our software, and that's a serious issue on its own. Another problem is, of course, the total world of all possible problems is so vast that there probably doesn't exist anything that's more intelligent than anything else. Fortunately, this universe, the surface of this planet, is a very specific environment, and there might exist intelligent beings that can thrive on it. I think we humans are at least an approximation to that. So that means that there might indeed be software that could be generally intelligent. The problem is, of course, most of the software we're writing is not generally intelligent at all. It's very good at one thing. So we're getting a lot of narrow AI, and you can make a fair bit of money from that. So far, you haven't been able to make that much money from general intelligence. Google DeepMind is doing some amazing stuff, but they're burning through a lot of money working on the holy grail of general intelligence. While probably if you were an investor, I would say, yeah, but I want something that makes me money now, or at least in 10 years.
I'm picking up on your point about operating in general environments. I think to be genuinely intelligent, which includes both emotional intelligence and what we're more generally concerned as, things like playing chess well. You have to understand complexity. We live in an incredibly complex world. All of us operate, here on this site. We are going to, in the next few hours, interact in some way or another, even if it's only walking on the path with them, with hundreds of people, all of whom bring their entire life histories and experience to how you interact on that path as you decide how to get past each other. That's an incredibly complex thing. And what I think is the kind of thing we need thinking, the sort of approach we need to take is systems thinking that brings in the kind of science, the rules that AI is good at, but it brings in a whole lot of other understandings, and it brings in an experience of you're actually good at navigating past people on that path because it's something you've done many thousands of times before. Your body knows how to do it. You probably don't consciously think about it at all. And that's one of the things that I think is the foundational problem with AI, is it's not embedded in bodies in the experience of being a lived body in the world. And it has to be. And I'm going to pick up on what David said and disagree with him very fundamentally, because, hey, that's what one does. But defending doctors, because I think if we apply systems thinking to ask why do people become doctors, yes, doctors are quite well paid, but if your motivation is money, there are things that are a lot better paid than medicine are, particularly GPs. People become doctors because they do care.
Thanks, Natalie. David?
Okay, well, that gives me great scope to answer the question. Just go back to the first bit, which is what's being intelligent? Well, I could say it's being female for a start, but apart from that, there's the issue about we make associations. There's the idea about computers can potentially be intelligent. They crunch huge amounts of data, much more than the human mind, at least the male mind, will ever be able to crunch. But there's another aspect to actually being intelligent, which has fallen out of the frame recently, which is about making judgment calls. It's about being able to decide when to take a risk. It's coming to a verdict, is coming to a diagnosis. And that's what intelligence is actually about. It's not just being able to crunch data. But and this comes to a crunch point when you think about the caring doctors should give. When should they take risks? And I think they aren't caring. I think they go into an awfully comfortable job where they're paid well and they've got a lot of status, and they have drifted into a kind of position at the moment where the greatest concentration of fake news on this planet centers on the drug a doctor gives you. Almost everything about an on-patent pharmaceutical is ghostwritten, and there's no access to the clinical trial data behind it. Now, the pharmaceutical companies are just doing what you'd expect the pharmaceutical companies to do. They're in the business of trying to maximize shareholder kind of, to maximize the value of the shares, which is great. They're doing what they should be doing. Doctors shouldn't be doing what they're doing, which is handing out these pills and not challenging the data, not the lack of access to the data, but also the data that happens when you come into them and say, look, doc, this pill that you just gave me, I'm becoming suicidal on it, or I'm hooked to it, or I'm unable to make love on it. They're not seeing you, and they're not listening to you these days. They aren't caring. And this is where they're not being intelligent. They're not making a diagnosis, they're not making a judgment call, they're not taking a risk. And it's not particularly intelligent, because if they don't do this, they're going out of business, because they're high-cost prescribers, and nurses and pharmacists will be cheaper, and they're replacing doctors now, and in the near future will be replaced by robots.
Anyone like to respond directly to any of that?
So one point here, so you say the doctors need to have a critical attitude to the information they're getting. That's bad news for the robots, because so far we haven't been very good at making AI that's good as a critical reader of information. This is actually a serious problem, and behind the scenes people are working a bit on it. But it's a tricky problem, because if you want to have machine learning systems to take in all the data, they are going to get the biased data. And probably right now humans are much better at figuring out, wait a minute, what's in it for a pharma company to tell me this? To a robot, it's not going to be that easy to figure out that part. However, it might be possible to get around, but I do think that fooling robots might actually become a big business.
But, no, fine, okay. But there is a point here. It isn't a case of the robot taking in the literature that's out there in the BMJ and the New England Journal of Medicine. There's no point taking that in. It's all fake at the moment, okay? What the robot will do, they'll learn that I should listen to the person right in front of me who's saying, this is happening, that the New England Journal of Medicine article says can't happen. The robot will learn, to keep this person alive, I need to listen to the person. Forget the New England Journal of Medicine article. The doctor isn't listening to you. What they're listening to is the manager that says to them, if you don't keep to the guidelines based on the New England Journal of Medicine, you will lose your job. That's what they're listening to. They're not listening to you.
I think
the robot won't lose a job, so that's why it will listen to you.
I think what we're hearing here is very much a caricature, and I don't think it reflects many of our own experiences of medicine. And I'm thinking here particularly of, there's a town up in the north called Todmorden, and it's famous, perhaps most famous, for an organisation called Incredible Edible, which grows food all around the town. And one of the very nice things that happened when they built a new doctor's surgery in Todmorden was every plant in the car park is edible. Now, it's not quite true to say that the doctors say, right, your prescription is to walk outside and pick 2 apples off the tree, but there's certainly an element of that. Now, I'm talking to young doctors, and young doctors are saying to me, we're not getting enough training in nutrition, we're not getting enough training in this holistic kind of approach. But they're critical of that, and they're going out and looking for the answers and looking for alternative approaches. And that's what many, not all, but many doctors are doing. And, I find it hard to imagine a robot saying, go out and pick 2 apples off the tree.
Okay, so let's move on to the second theme. So you heard at the start that studies have shown that doctors are only correct in 55% of easy cases and 66%, 6, not 66, of difficult ones. Now, that's quite a shocking statistic. Why do you think it is that doctors fail to make the correct diagnosis so often? And more importantly, could AI improve this situation? Is there therefore a place in medicine for, as you say, the meticulous diagnostic skills that are allowed by using things like big data and AI?
Well, I'll start off with the problem here, I would suggest, is not medicine. The problem is science and our level of understanding of the working of the human body.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.